Hey, welcome to episode number 57 of the American Regularis Podcast. I'm your host, JD Walter. Like and subscribe on YouTube, podcast, wherever it is you're listening. Everything you can do to help me out, very much appreciated. Like and subscribe, leave some comments, help the algorithm out. Okay, now let's cut to the chase. Today we're going to be discussing the LA riots. You can call them protests depending on what side there are. To be fair, there are some protests, but we're here to talk about the riots that are going on in Los Angeles. And I know they've spread out a little bit, but the main focus is still in California, LA. And I guess it shouldn't be too surprising. It seems to be that when Trump is in office, riots shortly follow, generally as soon as the summer hits, right? So, what's going on this time? Well, as most of us has heard, the ICE deportations have started to escalate and ramp up in Los Angeles. Now, we all know Los Angeles, Southern California, it's probably the number one spot. If not, it's right at the top for places where illegal immigrants go due to proximity. I should say illegal immigrants due to the proximity to the border, right, with Mexico, where not only Mexicans, but different places from Central, just Latin America in general, get through. Also, when you combine that with California's very liberal government, right, in general, the sanctuary cities, that just makes it just ground zero for, some of the largest immigrant populations, which we're going to get into because it's just insane how many immigrants, illegal or otherwise, but particularly illegal, who will be affected by the ICE deportations are in Los Angeles. Now, this has many people mad, and it's understandable. There's just to maybe not still, man, I think that word's used a lot over, but to give it some fair, there's going to be a lot of hardships during this. Even if you're someone like myself who thinks the deportations have to happen, there will be friends of people, right? Just because someone's over here, I don't hold it against, and I've said it before on this podcast, I don't hold it against people for coming over illegally. I don't. If I thought it was the best way to provide for my family, I could do it. And I don't find, while I think it's a huge problem for America, I don't see it as an individual. If I'm in Honduras or El Salvador, and I'm trying to get somewhere to make money to provide for my family. Yeah, especially with the lax laws. It's like, oh, at worst, they'll just send me back. I can spend time with my family, get back in. I don't hold it against them, but it's a huge problem for the U.S. Aside from that, there will be people, you make friends with these people. Just because they're legal doesn't mean they're not decent people, right? That's abundantly clear. And they'll be in your community. They'll be working for you, or several things. So there are going to be people that are very much against this. I'm not, like I said, full transparency. I do, however, understand where emotions could run high. Now, in no way does that justify the riots that we're about to get into. And I think it is not only a bad look from a political optics standpoint for those who are against the deportations, I think it's very telling of a major issue, actually a couple major issues, that are a result of large-scale, not just illegal immigration, but immigration in general. So this podcast, we're going to look at those things and really examine, like, what is this indicative of? What does this show for the future of America? And what are the intentions, really? Because we've had some absolutely weird and wild comments from people in the Mexican government, from people in our government about these things. And this is not only a problem in the U.S., but we see this problem. I just heard a statistic. Now, it could be wrong, but it was something like over 80% of kids under 8 or people under 18 in Belgium were not Belgium born, right? We talk on many episodes about the different immigration problems, whether it's the UK, whether it's France, Germany, Belgium, and the situation's different, but there's a lot of parallels here in the good old US of A. So, first off, let's just talk about the numbers in general. Before we get to the actual riots themselves, right now, according to, as of 2022, so not even at the end of the Biden term, which was just flooding the nation with illegal immigrants. According to Homeland Security, in 2022, California alone had an estimated 2.6 million unauthorized immigrants, illegal immigrants. Nationwide, the estimates at that time were 12 million nationwide. So you can see where, while immigration and illegal immigration is a huge thing throughout the United States with 12 million, 2.5 alone in one state and likely in the southern portions, right? That right there shows you just how much of an impact this is going to have on that area, regardless of which side you're on. Okay, now, estimated total legal immigrants for the U.S. is 36 million. 36 legally here. And California, 5.8 legally there. So if we just do the quick math, we're over 8 million legal immigrants in California. To put this in perspective nationwide, legal immigrants, 36 million approximately, right? I didn't count every one of them. That's the population of estimated or ballpark. That's around the same number of people that are in Canada or Afghanistan. If you add illegal and legal immigrants together, that's 53 million, whatever. Round up a couple decimals, take down a couple. Around 53 odd million immigrants. Now, that's the population of California. We have an entire... Now, I'm not saying there's no difference between illegal and legal immigrants, but I'm saying there are similarities and that they'll be bringing in cultures outside of the U.S. and that there will be issues with assimilation, cultural beliefs, practices, understanding of laws, etc., etc. 53 million weren't born here. Now, some of these have green cards, some of them are naturalized citizens, right? I'm not, and in no way am I saying kick those people out. I'm letting you know that the nation will change when you have the largest, most populated state in the U.S. is California, and we have that many illegal immigrants. Excuse me, that many total immigrants. I should definitely correct myself on that. That's going to change things. Now, if we look at that as its own state, its biggest state, and we just, for simplicity's sake, call it California, we have a California worth of total immigrants. In terms of our government, in terms of people being represented, that's 54 electoral votes for California and 52 House seats. That's substantial. Those people are being represented, by the way. The number of people, whether they're citizens or not, is included in how congressional seats and electoral college votes are proportioned. Okay, that's important to realize. Now, some of you might be saying, oh yeah, that's the plan. Well, I agree with you. This is why, despite them saying, hey, some 80-year-old sweet black grandma in the South can't get a driver's license, that's not true. Like, the reason the left doesn't want voter ID laws is because there's 53, well, and to be fair again, the naturalized citizens would have their voting rights there. But when we look, that's millions upon millions of people, and they don't need them all to vote. Not in these elections. Look what the popular vote, it comes down to a couple 100,000 seats here or there determine the elections nowadays. They just need a fraction of them. That is why they don't want ID in government elections to be shown. That's why the left's against that. Now let's get into the actual riots itself, right? Or the protests. They started out as protests, and then they, I would say, quickly turned into events with a lot of peaceful vehicular fires, if you want me to spin it the way, the corporate media does. And if you don't believe me, here's one example from, I believe, a local LA news channel.
Large group of people, it could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers and demonstrators.
Well, there you go. It's not, protests where people are, as you have probably seen in the videos, throwing rocks through law enforcement vehicles. It's not setting fires to places. It's not rampant looting. It's just a little, let me see my Spanish, a little El Caro barbacoa. They're just having fun. They're just enjoying. No one, there's not enough heat in Southern California in the summer, so they thought, let's get a little warm, get the chill off our bones, burn a couple vehicles, right? If we're listening to Paul Krugman, that stimulates the economy, right? Now we need more gas, we need more cars. They're just doing their part. They went out of their way from the day laboring and stuff, which is oftentimes essential and whatnot. And they said, let's help. Let's do a Krugman thing, right? Let's build the economy up with some fiery but peaceful protests. And that's what we're not getting on our side, is just how helpful violent riots can be. Of course, you also see the burning of American flags, and there's this ironic thing going on that you've probably heard others talk about, and we're going to talk about now, is they're burning the American flag, the old stars and stripes, and throughout these riots, you see them waving the flag of Mexico around, very proudly. Now, conservatives are getting this a little bit wrong when they say, look, these guys have their wires crossed, they don't understand, they're burning the stars and stripes, they're waving the Mexican flag, but you don't want to go back there. Well, yes and no. This isn't a confusion on the rioters about what nation they want to be in. Okay? I believe the flag should be legal to burn. I'm a free speech absolutist. I'm a rabid libertarian, and I don't believe in victimless crimes. So I guess it would depend whose flag it is, right? So if it's your stars and stripes and you want to burn it, I think you should be able to burn it. However, why are we burning it? Now, I can understand there's parts when people have burnt the flag and it was in protest of the United States government. If you listen to this podcast, you realize, well, that's what most of this is me complaining about the United States government. I have a lot of gripes with it. So if I'm equating the national flag, the stars and stripes, to the government, the state, yeah, I'm not going to have a whole lot of good, warm, fuzzy feelings in my cockles, in my heart, or whatever. However, if I view the stars and stripes as America, as the nation, as the people, the culture, the land, well then yes, I have a great deal of reverence for all of those things. And if the flag serves as a symbol for that, then yeah, I'm on board and I don't want you burning it. Even if I don't, believe in making that a crime. This is the latter. This is not a protesting the government burning, I don't believe. You could argue that it was, but once they're waving the flag of the Mexican flag, we realize this isn't about a state-by-state comparison. This is a cultural thing. There's many with the Mexican flag that are born in America that are waving it, that consider themselves more Mexican. I heard in interviews where like, no, I would side with Mexico over America. They're like, where were you born? I was born in America, but I'm a Mexican American. There's some that take this hierarchy of culture, right? They consider themselves Mexican before American. Obviously, that's the case with people that recently got here, with people that don't want to become citizens. There are people that are here to make money, and I won't fault them for that, as I said, but they're sending it all back to their families in Mexico. I wouldn't fault them for that either. But we have to realize that these people are not Americans. That's fine. There's a lot of great people that aren't Americans. There's a lot of terrible people that are. But it is not intrinsically wrong for the American people to have our own self-interests. Especially when it's inside our nation. It's on our land. I would argue oftentimes, like, yes, we shouldn't go chasing monsters abroad and we look for these special interests in the military-industrial complex. They look for what they call American interests, which are their own, and they go and launch wars overseas. But I understand, and as well as everyone else should understand, that America, like any other nation, is just as righteous in having its own self-interest, its own belief, its own desire to preserve itself and its culture as any other nation. Now, this is conflated a lot because of leftists and because of globalists, which run akin to each other if they're not one and the same. But don't let the media, don't let the left wing fool you. There's nothing wrong with wanting to preserve your culture, with wanting to preserve your nation. And this argument so oftentimes gets reduced down to an economic thing. Well, we need them to work. And I'm not saying we don't need foreign labor and that we might not need to import immigrants. But if we do it recklessly, yes, we will lose our nation. And when I say that, I don't strictly mean, it's whatever, some Anglo-Saxon looking guy with, whatever, eating cheeseburgers. That's not just it. Any nation throughout time, look at any country, any empire, as there's an influx of diversity, cultural in this case, that comes in, there are issues, whether it's religious, language differences, cultural differences of any sort. It is a natural procession to division, right? There will be more differences. And among differences, like differences, dissension, divisiveness, these things aren't good for a nation. Look at the Romans, right? Was it great when all the Goths and Lombards and whoever else was that smooth rolling? Like, no, Rome succeeded in the East. The Western Rome Empire ended up being done. These things happen. And look, sometimes something new comes out of it. Okay, but that doesn't mean that someone can't want to retain their land the way that they've seen it, the way that it was maybe viewed with their and yes, there's always been a large degree of Hispanic heritage and culture and tradition in the Southwest, Southern California. So I'm not saying that can't be there. I'm saying that there has to be some sort of reverence for it, or you're going to get a Quebec situation or some little diaspora in Europe, right, that just doesn't fit in with the rest of its country. That doesn't work well. It never does. Now, what happens in the United States' case is we take, as people always do, they take these very myopic, very narrow visions of history. What am I going to say? Some of you already know. It was a nation founded by immigrants. Indeed it was. Okay? So what? Yes, it was. Everybody immigrated at some point or another. Right? You want to go to the out of Africa theory, like someone's moved at some point every time. But it's a nation founded by immigrants. After that, we've said our one-liner, we've said the thing, the media headline, and so ipso facto, let anybody in, illegal or otherwise. And then they say, well, the guidelines are different than it was when your ancestors came over through Ellis Island. Yeah, it was. It was different there, and it might have been more laxed. That doesn't matter. Okay, progressives sit there and they worry, and the left, they say, hey, we've got to change this. These laws are antiquated. These laws are antiquated. And then they immediately go back to the 1860s to look at how we should run modern immigration. Okay, we had so many less people back then. And over the course of 100 years, from around 1820 to 1920 is when the second and third giant waves of immigration came into America. In total, we brought in about 25 million people. Now, that was over the course of 100 years. I just told you, we have legal and illegal 53 million right now, twice as much. So this is, without a doubt, a huge nation-changing wave of immigration. We read about the other waves of immigration in history books. This one will be written about as well because it'll be a huge change. Not necessarily for the better, especially when it's very strongly localized and you have one, culture in a certain enclave, it takes longer for them to assimilate. Whether it's the Cajuns, right, down in Louisiana, or the Pennsylvania Dutch, whatever, which are actually Germans, right, from the Palatinate, I believe. It takes longer. It takes them longer to learn languages. You get Chinatowns. If one Vietnamese family moves to the middle of Iowa, they quickly assimilate. If you have a large group and they form their own communities, which I'm not saying is wrong, it's going to be more troublesome, however, to assimilate them and to have them being viewed as America. And as right now, with these American flag burnings, with these Mexican flag wavings, these are not assimilated people. I think we can safely say that. Now, my ancestors have been here for quite some time longer than these, so it's not like a feather in my cap or anything, but I would feel pretty stupid if I waved around a German flag or a Union Jack. Like, maybe you got a t-shirt of it somewhere. You're a Polak from Chicago, you got the White Eagle on your shirt somewhere. It makes sense, but you would feel foolish to represent yourself as a Polish person before you represented yourself as an American. And with the proximity, to Mexico, it makes it that much more difficult, right? Because the culture is stronger there. Now, these diasporas, these communities that have their own distinct culture, usually cause trouble. You look at the Quebec, they wanted to revolt not all that long ago, and it's not like they're bad people, it's just a difference in culture. We still see it a little bit. I used the Pennsylvania Dutch as an example earlier. Like the Amish were the ones that just were not going to assimilate, right? They were the Amish Mennonites, Anabaptists, not Mennonites. The Amish, I know the Mennonites were Anabaptists. Were the Amish also Anabaptists? All right, that's neither here nor there. However, they still haven't really assimilated, but it's not too bad because they're not, one, saying that they belong to Germany, right, before America, and two, they're not burning their horse-drawn carriages out in the middle of the street. If it was at that point, maybe we'd have more contention with the Amish, but like I said, they're also just a much smaller population, right? The Hispanic Americans, and it's certainly Hispanic immigrants, are much larger populations than the Amish. Okay, going back to this view about these myopic viewpoints in history, I want to point out a couple of views from the Mexican government. First off, El Presidente Scheinbaum, Claudia Scheinbaum, which is not the most traditional Mexican name. However, she threatened to mobilize about these riots, which basically was the Trump's big beautiful bill, which we went over a little bit in the last part. There's a remittance tax. So what happens is a ton of these illegal immigrants, and some that are legal with green cards and whatnot, they come here, they work, but they send their money back to Mexico. It's actually one of the larger industries in Mexico is sending back wages earned in America, right? American capital being sent back to Mexico. Trump's big beautiful bill, he wanted to put in a big beautiful disaster bill, right? He wanted to put in a 3.5% remittance tax, which means, hey, if you're sending it back across international lines, we're going to take some of it back. She was not happy about that. Fine. She's fine to feel that way. I have no problem with it. I'm against taxation in general, but as that's like not the hill I'm going to die on is the remittance tax. I'll talk about, let's get rid of the income tax. Let's get rid of property tax first. More interesting than that was the president, the Mexican Senate president, whose name is Gerardo Fernandez Norona. He was seen here holding up an old map of the United States, or a map of the United States boundaries, and in it you see the Southwest. We're talking Texas, I think part of Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and California. And it says Mexico in 1830. And he says, now this has been translated, names don't lie. The most spoken language in Los Angeles is Spanish. I already said how this could be a problem. The United States government has the right to implement whatever immigration measures it deems appropriate, but they have no right to violate the dignity of immigrants. Whatever dignity means. When he says dignity, that's just a catch-all political term. Like normal people, we know what dignity is. Dignity in this effect by a politician means something he doesn't want to define. They have no right to separate families. Look, I understand that part's heartbreaking. I have one anecdote about that. I overheard a conversation with people I know. I was there, but I wasn't like taking an active role in the conversation. And one of them says, a close family member of theirs, not a mother's, but like a cousin or an uncle, there got deported for being illegal. And the other people consoled, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's so sad. What about his family? And then the person who was reporting about their family member being deported goes, oh, well, they're back in Mexico. He's just going to go back to them. So, yes, there will be times where it might separate families. And mark my words, I have sympathy for that. Let me do the politician thing. Let me be clear. I have a lot of sympathy for them, right? I feel sorry for those. That's a hard thing, right? Family's much more important than government or politics, in my opinion. However, you can't say that this isn't also bringing families together. Now, I don't know the proportions. Like I said, mine was anecdotal. It was a one-off. It's bringing families together, too. Now, if you want to run stats and look at it, I don't know if I'll believe you either way, but maybe it's clear to show that it's bringing more families together than not. Maybe it's showing that it's tearing up more families than not, right? But that's a reality of it. But they have no right to violate the dignity of immigrants. This is the Senate Mexican president again. They have no right to separate families. Norona said he told Trump Mexico would build the wall and pay for it, but will do it according to the 1830 map of Mexico. Now, this is political theater. He doesn't actually think they're going to annex, 20% of the United States or whatever. But he's trying to say, hey, look, we were here before you. This is their land, actually more than it is the land of anyone else. The Hispanic, the Mexicans, the Central Americans, they have more claim to this land than you. That's the implication there. Obviously, this is very myopic. We look at one picture, okay? Now, let's just go over some brief facts about this. Yes, it wasn't always American land. We all should, I hope to hell, we all know that. It was in fact owned by the nation of Mexico. Now, was it actually governed by them much, or was it just a stated claim? Yeah, they owned it for about 24 years. Okay, if you lived as long as Mexico owned California, New Mexico, Arizona, etc., this what he shows on the map, you would not be able to rent an RV for a vacation, right? Insurance wouldn't cover it. That's how long they owned it. Now, during this time, it wasn't like they had, a whole bunch of, Mexico cities. It wasn't this vibrant, place bristling with Tejanos. Is that what you call them? Yeah, Tejanos or Californios, right? Mexicans in general. They weren't there. They owned the territory. It would be like if the U.S. got Greenland and 25 years later we give it up, and then 150 years later we're like, oh my goodness, this is the heart and soul of America. Greenland is ours. It is ours by birthright. It's just not the case. They weren't living there. There was likely 100 to 150,000 people in the modern day areas of Texas, California, New Mexico, Arizona. Extremely sparsely populated by anyone who would consider themselves Mexican, right? There was more Native Americans at that point there. So don't fall for these politicians that are trying to wave their hand with smoke screen and mirrors and these little bitty snippets of history. Generally, there's few people dumber and more dishonest about history than politicians. So when they say it, and then by proxy, the talking heads or whoever the person on the street is that heard their snippet from the politician they like, give a historical quote about this. Now you've got a little more knowledge. These lands were Mexico owned for a very short time, 24 years. Hardly, an extremely small percentage of their people lived there. They were in no way cultural or economic hubs at all. They basically just got the land as Spain ceded it to them, and they weren't able to manufacture it or anything of this nature, like to a large scale. They didn't just overhaul it, right? And then it was taken from them, whether you like it or not, in the Mexican-American War. Like, those are the facts. And the land has been owned by, it's a huge swath of land. So, whatever, dozens of Native American tribes, right? Most of which would not be considered any of the predecessors to the Mexican lineage. It was owned by Spain for longer. It was owned by the United States much, much longer. Okay? So, when you hear that, don't buy into it. So this is just pure political theater. What it does show is that they're saying, hey, we don't recognize that they recognize the border. That was political theater saying he wants to build the wall there. Obviously, they couldn't either way. That's even a longer border than the Rio Grande or the Mexican-American border for sure. All they're saying, with the burning of the American flag, with the dismissal that this is actually what we're on Mexican land too. Well, great. You guys pay the reparations to the indigenous tribes or whatever, right? It's just theater trying to dismiss American cultural sovereignty over its own lands. And guess what? We're not going to do that. We're not going to play that game. It's a dumb game. It's based on bad history. And it's holding the United States to a standard that no other nation in the world is really held up to. Now, I know the Europeans are making a mockery of some of their nations on their own, but they don't have the story about being founded by immigrants that for some reason other nations and the left think is some sort of carte blanche, set in stone thing that gives America no right to its own lands. No, footing to embrace and want to preserve its own culture and identity. That's all nonsense. Okay, we've got a lot of stuff going on in Iran right now and in the Middle East in general, Israel. So I might try to get in another podcast in the next day or two. But for now, I'm really happy you listened to this one. We'll update this more if it needs to be updated more. If you're still here, thank you so much. Again, like and subscribe, tell your friends, and we'll catch you on the next one.